Hello YouTube, welcome back. We're not at Nutkin Farm, as you can see by this drainage channel. We're in the flats of Tevan at the moment on a farm that's managed by 2TE. That's a company owned by Robbie Commons, and we have his permission to film here today. This farm is named Grace and Truth. It's one of the many farms owned by Neo Farms. It's a Korean company that I think from someone senior in Samsung who, like a lot of Koreans, fell in love with the macadamia nut, and is a bit like the Remington guy who liked it so much that he bought the company. Well, he decided to set up macadamia farms of his own, and they're managed here by Robbie and a couple of other people. So with his permission, we're using this as a backdrop for today. But the person I'm talking to actually doesn't work on this farm. He comes from a lot further away. And would you believe he is an expert in pollination? He's a pest scout. He is an expert in native bees. And on top of all that, he's a grower's liaison with Nutworks, a macadamia processor. So wearing all those hats, welcome to Chris Fuller. And you've come down from the Glasshouse Mountains, or the Sunshine Coast anyway.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
Nutworks is based in Yandina, isn't it?
Yep, Yandina is where the original factory is. We now have two other facilities as well. We have a factory in Croy, where we do one of the products over here. I'll show you in a bit.
Yep.
And we also have a sorting and consolidation facility at Lovers Walk in Bundaberg.
Right, so that's really spreading your wings.
Yeah, it is.
How long have you been in business?
The company's coming up 30 years next year, so it's been around a while. Originally started by a couple of growers and their mates.
Were they Glasshouse Mountains, or were they?
They were. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And is it you're the only one around that area, or is Suncoast Gold in that area?
So Suncoast Gold's a bit further north in Gympie.
Okay.
Along with.
So they're more close to Bundaberg.
Well, it's I don't know, 3/4 of an hour up the road from us.
Oh, that's all. Right. Right, okay. I still haven't got my bearings there. I'm going to do a road trip one day. I'm going to visit you, but in the meantime, you're visiting here and seeing some people around here. So I thought I'd take the chance to talk to you, and thank you for agreeing to be interviewed.
Yeah, great.
Bit of a hard hat time to be a nut processor at the moment, but you're a grower's rep, and so in general, I mean, in fact, the very first macadamia show I did was with a grower's rep. It was from Garth from Wally's Nuts, and poor old Wally's is going through a very tough time at the moment.
Yeah, that came as a bit of a shock to everyone, I think, and it's certainly. You know, you feel for the growers and for the people involved in Wally's. It's never nice to see something like that on.
Yeah, look, they're good people, or they seemed good people to me when I supplied them one year, and they were fine. They paid on time and everything. It must have been a big shock to a lot of their growers. But is it something where it's sending ripples through the rest of the industry, or have you got nervous people ringing you?
Oh, look, we certainly do, and we will respond to our growers and just try to. Give them obviously the confidence and reaffirm that no, we're more than confident with holding our price going forward. It's it's very unfortunate for those growers involved. Yeah, and the owners of the company, obviously.
Yeah, well, we might come back to the industry a little bit later, but look, for now, Nutworks, as far as I know anyway, and you can fill me in on this, you're one of the processors who largely processes your own nuts and then sells them into the Australian market, or do you sell? Yeah,
we do. About 40% of our revenue comes from our value add range. We do all our own manufacturing at the Yandina and Croy facilities.
Okay.
We do obviously sell bulk nut and shell and kernel as well.
Right.
But we are increasing our value add. We really see our point of difference, and we like to think we're the leading Australian manufacturer of packaged macadamias.
Right, and I think you've got some of that to show us now.
Yeah. Brought them down. Let's other than the packet we ripped open and tried.
Let's go. He's put them all on the gate of my ute. That doesn't mean I'm taking them home with me. I don't accept gifts on this channel, but look at this array.
It is.
This is very attractive retail packaging.
It is. A lot of people do comment on the packaging, and it did take our team a good couple of years, the transition from our old packaging to this, but it really does stand out, and it's a testament to the guys at Nutworks who are involved.
I don't see this stuff on the shelves of supermarkets as such. That's not your target, or
Look, we definitely do. We have products in a lot of IGAs and independent supermarkets.
okay,
We do. The range has been into the Aldi special buys. We are in negotiations with a couple of other supermarket chains at the moment.
yeah,
You'll find it in all the duty-free shops at the airports.
Right.
Yeah, and we do export the value-add product as well.
which is great. Great export dollars. Are you selling Aldi their nut and shell product that they sell to customers? Oh, sorry, the kernel product, because I noticed they're often a big seller of kernels.
Yeah, where we got into Aldi was a couple of years ago when there was an oversupply of a particular style, 4L.
Yep.
We produced a packet that was made up of 4L. It was our way to move the 4L.
Yeah.
And it worked really well. So we did that under a brand called Nutty by Nature.
Yes.
And it was in there in a sort of 300, I think it was a 300, 350 gram pack in 2 or 3 different flavours through Aldi. That's how we
Right.
got that in there.
And for the beginners, 4L is a style. I know what it means. It's largely large pieces, isn't
Correct.
it?
Yeah, a lot of halves and sort of quarters sort of thing.
Yeah,
So,
you'll get the odd
that can
hole.
be,
Yeah.
in a normal season,
Yeah.
when you get the style spread when you crack, that's the most percentage of your nut comes out as 4L, style 4L.
Right, so there's more 4L than anything else.
Yep.
Okay. So the style 0, which is the so-called perfect style,
Yeah,
big
the
round
big
nuts.
holes, yeah.
Who wants them? I mean, I like them, but who wants them the most?
Yeah, well, internationally they're very popular.
Right.
But again, we do use some of them ourselves in our range.
Yep.
It depends, obviously, where the money's at. So.
Right. Oh, well, let's take a look at what you've got here, because there's some stuff here I've not seen before. Starting at this end, these are in shell.
So these are roasted in the shell, and then we put the cut in the shell, and you open them with the key. So
this is how the Chinese buy them, isn't it?
they do that.
Yeah.
Traditionally, the very first cut nut I tried was from China, and it was a vanilla flavored one. This is our newest one, the vanilla cut nut.
So does the vanilla flavour get in through the cut?
Yes, so it's
Wow.
it's put in through the cut. So the roast salt. This of all the lines we do, and we do a lot of lines. I think it's almost 35 to 40 different value add products we do.
Oh, wow.
This has got to be up there for me. I do like a beer.
So salt gets in the shell.
So it's put in through a brine. So
the brine, right.
their brine goes into the cut, then they come up, and we essentially have an enormous pizza oven, and then they're passed through and roasted in the shell, and they pick up a flavour off the inside of the shell that, it's great.
That makes sense. The Brookies make a gin, or they make a nut liqueur,
Yep.
where they are soaking macadamia shells in the liqueur,
Yeah.
and they reckon they're getting more flavour from the shells than from the nut.
Yeah, well, part of the thing I like doing at the factory now is finding use for our essentially our byproducts, and we have done work with distillers and brewers. We've some of our meal gets roasted, and we've got a local craft brewery up the road from us, Torella, and they've done nut beers for us in the past. You can actually get a beer on tap at our shop now.
Wow.
So that's the one I like to have with my nut beer.
With a nut beer.
I like that roasted.
What's the beer like?
It's great.
Yeah?
Yeah, they're very good brewers.
Can you taste macadamia, or is it just an edge?
It's there at the back.
Right.
And he's quite clever, Brant, the head brewer there, on how he gets that flavour out of the meal.
Yeah.
And then puts it into I've been working on it for a few years with them. We've had a number of goes, and we've finally got it on tap at our shop. We do have a retail shop at Nutworks at Yandina, just opposite the ginger factory.
Oh, so it's right near. Oh, well, I've been to the
Straight
ginger
opposite,
factory.
Yeah, we're straight opposite there.
Okay. You pick up a few customers from that?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
We get obviously they come out of the ginger factory and they spot our factory straight across the road.
You've got a website as well.
Yeah, just nutworks.com.au, you'll find us.
And this stuff's for sale there?
It is. You can buy everything online. There's a lot of gift hampers. Gift hampers are very, very popular.
Right.
With our products, so we get very, very busy in the lead up to Christmas.
Okay. Let's have a look at some of these other packs here. This one here,
Yeah, that's one of the newest lines, a very, very popular finger lime and jalapeno. Hard to keep up with supply to that. It's
Really? Yeah. How did it come about? Did you?
It was a clever idea of our marketing team. We had a competition basically of everyone who buys online and through the shop, and we suggested to the public to give us your ideas for a new flavour.
Yeah.
And there was a great prize pack, so we won. Staying at the Mayan Villas in Kin and meals cooked by Matt Kalinsky, which was fantastic. A hamper of our nuts, and it's a rich reward. Summer who won that was very, very happy.
I'll bet
with her win, and she's come up with a fantastic flavour combination.
I love the packaging. So we've got dark chocolate and salted chili.
Yep,
that's awesome. We've got wasabi. I've tasted wasabi macadamias before. They blow your mouth off.
I do like that one as well.
Yeah.
I suppose I'm a bit of a sucker for anything that goes well with a beer.
Yeah, wasabi would. Yeah. The roasted and salters is...
Roast salt's classic. Very classic. Popular.
Yeah. Rosemary and sea salt, that's a new one.
Funny enough, that one has been around a while.
Right.
And one of
new
the
to me.
New to yourself, yeah.
Manuka honey.
Very,
wow.
Very popular.
Yeah.
So this is just part of our range. There are more.
Crunchy hickory.
Yep.
Oh, so there's more than this?
There is more than this, yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Wow.
So yeah, you'll see the whole range online and in our shop at Yandao.
And some of them then get through to IGA and those sorts of places.
Yeah, we've got a very clever marketing manager, and she will work out exactly which lines are best directed where. So
okay.
I suppose the beauty of what we can do because we do the range of value add, we've got options with our intake to direct different styles and types of nuts into the different products, so we can find sort of a home for everything we get in.
Okay. Yeah, so there's obviously some styles that you won't put in these commercial products, like the chips and cracks and that sort of stuff.
Of course. So we do sell the chips as a separate line as well. We do also do the oils and the pastes and everything else as well. So
okay.
We have bakery lines. We've got sort of a chef's pantry range, which that's for the chips and the baking styles of nut we get in, the oils, and again we've got chefs who give us recipes, and the people coming into the shop can go and buy exactly what that chef's used from our range, our chef's range.
Are you limited by the amount of nut you receive, or could you be doing more of this, or are you sort of controlling your growth?
We are controlling our growth.
Okay.
We are expanding in Yandina. We have a big vacant block next door, and that is earmarked for a new factory coming soon. So our focus is on growing our value add and lessening our reliance on sales of mainly nut and shell, but also bulk kernel.
Right. So, it's a familiar theme, I have to say. Marquee they don't do any as much end category stuff as what we're talking about here, but they're certainly leaning away from nut and shell sales into sort of value add themselves.
Yeah.
And is that a response to lower macadamia prices for nut and shell, or just world uncertainty, or what's?
Well, in reality, China is still the biggest buyer of nut and shell.
Yeah.
And if you're relying wholly on nut and shell to China, you're basically at the whim of the buyers over there.
Yeah.
And the export specs are getting tighter and tighter.
Yeah.
And our growing conditions are getting more challenging.
Yeah, no, I heard China was starting to specify they wanted 22 mil nut, and we don't have a lot of that this year apparently, but we'll get into that in a minute. But so that's part of the reason, I suppose. But is there more money to be made in value add here? Yeah,
definitely.
And you hire, how many employees are we talking about in Nutworks?
We have around 60 between the three facilities.
That's more than I expected. Yeah.
It's a bustling place and growing. So,
yeah. Oh, that's great.
Yeah, it's been really good. I've been in the industry for 30 years now. I think we mentioned Ian McConaughey at one point. Ian gave me my first job fresh out of ag college, and I've been pest scouting for Ian. I ran his nursery originally at Wolvi.
Yeah.
And then was pest scouting for the company owned at the time, Australian Macadamia Management.
Yeah. Well, that's a bit of heritage.
Yeah,
to be taught by the master himself.
Yeah. It's been really good. I've known him a long time, and it's been a really good relationship. So
I've read his book. Cover to cover, and one of the funny things that I laugh because I've met him, and he said he never got on terribly well with his employers when he was employed by other people. But presumably he was a better boss than he was an employee.
Right. I must say I'm quite lucky. I suppose the majority, the biggest chunk of my career, I worked for myself privately as a pest consultant. But the times I have been employed, I've been employed by very good people. So I'm lucky.
Right, and now as a growers liaison, you get to use that knowledge in, I guess, assisting some of the growers.
Yep.
Right. Okay, well, we'll get on to that now. So we're moving into the orchard that we're visiting at the moment, and we're going along a row of 344s, which, like my 344s, even though they're young, they're flowering out of season, Chris. I don't know if you've got many 344s in the Glasshouse Mountains. Is it a common variety there?
It is, interestingly. And so when I started, as mentioned with Ian before, there's orchards around the Gympie region which are wholly 741 and 344. It's a very traditional variety up our way.
And they do cross-pollinate each other, don't they?
They do,
yeah.
246, funny enough, if you look back at the literature, is one of the best general pollinizers of other varieties in the game, and it's quite an old, good established variety as well.
This is what Robbie's doing here.
Correct.
So what he's done with these rows is that there's grids of 9. So every single 344 has either direct or diagonal access to a 246 for pollinizing.
It's to me, that's a very clever design.
Yeah, I'm doing a grid of 9 for my new block of R, variety R. That's good. But look, we've got out of season flowering here, and I mean, I guess you can tell us from the horse's mouth what happened in the Glasshouse Mountains this season.
Look, like the other regions, I think there's been a combination of things that have happened that have affected this year's crop.
Yeah.
The flowering span was very short.
Yep.
And if you think about it,
did you get rain?
We did have a little bit of rain.
Yeah.
We certainly had good lead-up rains of flowering. We're quite excited about the moisture profile. Ground moisture profile was going to be full and good to go. But we got bits of rain during flowering. It was a short flowering span. I mean, normally, our main flowering will happen over, a 6-7 week period, and it seemed to be all over in about 3 weeks.
Okay. Was there a heat wave in the middle of it?
We didn't get the heat. I know the talk down
we did in the Northern Rivers.
About a couple of 40-degree days. We wouldn't have got close to that, and I doubt Bundaberg would have either. And they are both down as well, and certainly the Glasshouse region it's way down.
Okay. Did you have an absence of bees like we did?
That was raised, and that's very possibly contributed.
We're going to have a chat about that before I let you go.
One of my pet topics
is native bees, which
all bees as well.
Oh, even honeybees.
Importantly now, every bee is a good bee.
Yeah. Look, I'm having a chat with Nick Savage shortly on what went wrong with the 2025 season, and I think a lot of farmers are going to be interested in that chat. But certainly from your point of view, Glasshouse Mountains is having a bad year.
It's as bad as what I've heard down here, and there's
But define bad. Is it a low number of nuts, or is it low kernel recovery? Is it small nuts?
It's a combination of
insect
of low yields, and there is definitely smaller size nut as well. And we know, for every mill in nut and shell size down, you're talking quite a big percentage of loss of kernel.
Right.
And it is varietal. There's some varieties up our way that have had a very poor year. Dattos, 842s. There's 3 or 4 that 741s has been the worst,
which is a problem because it's the most planted variety, isn't it? Well, in Bundaberg anyway.
There's a lot of 741s.
Yeah, and we should clarify, you're one of the only processors that accepts nut from just about everywhere. I mean, you've got Bundaberg, you've got Glasshouse Mountains, and you do a deal with Summerland House or something.
We've had,
so New South Wales can supply.
We've had arrangements with Summerland for a number of years now. We've got a few growers down here. So yes, we definitely do accept nut from this region.
Yeah.
Accept nut, and
so you're seeing it coming in. from.
Yeah.
And what the quality's like from all three regions.
Correct. Yeah. So, and we do look at the sizes that do come in, and we look at the range of that and the volume of the size spread as well. It's very interesting, the data.
Yeah. So the yield's down, the size is down. In terms of the quality and rejects, that sort of stuff, are you getting insect damage more? It's been a good year for insects, hasn't it?
It hasn't been too bad for insect. The one insect I think that has had a bit of impact in our region, and it is what I mentioned. We are going to be discussing at the July round of MAC groups in our area. I believe broad mite has impacted the yields this season at the flowering.
You're talking at the MAC group in the Northern Rivers too, aren't you?
Correct, yeah.
Right, okay, so everyone go to the MAC group and you'll be able to see Chris and speak to him in person. But what's broad mite basically? It's a kind of mite, obviously.
Yeah, it is. It's a mite, very, very small. So,
okay.
Jeremy, so we'll be talking with Jeremy Bright from New South Wales DPI, and he sort of advocates people get themselves to 30 times hand lens or jeweler's loop.
Right.
We call them, which I do have somewhere here in my pocket. There it is.
These things.
Yeah. That's the hand lens I use, and as I normally would use a 10 times magnification.
That's a 30 times.
But I've gone to 30 times now. I'm a little bit older than when I started in my early 20s.
Yeah.
So I use that, and it does help out. The mites are very, very small.
Well, where do you look? Where would you look for a mite? If you can demonstrate that for us.
If you look at the literature, it's been around a long time. It's always been in Jeremy's plant protection guides.
Yep.
There's papers in South Africa and from Hawaii that describe it being a pest there. We see it a lot of time just on the flush, but it will also attack the flower.
Right, because I've only ever heard of mites attacking flush, and if you spray bulldog you can cause a flare up in mites.
That's correct.
But is that the broad mite we're talking about, or is that a different mite?
It is that same mite. My concerns are, and this is just something I've sort of come to with what I've noticed on our orchards, all our growers' orchards. I've seen it build a couple of times in the last few years, and then it can disappear. It can disappear with a change in weather. There is a predatory mite that can help control it. And I'd see it build up at the start of flowering, coming off flush, and then it'd sort of disappear. But I think
what does it do to the flower?
It will attack the flower. I do have some that I collected from Biwa on the way down the day before yesterday.
Okay.
And that is actually some from here, or from this region. I've found in.
You found them in New South Wales?
Yeah.
Right.
They would have always. They'll be everywhere every year, to a degree, to a level.
It's the level of infestation.
Yeah, that's correct.
Right. What can it do to the flower? Can it make it non-viable? Or
correct. Yeah. So
by doing what?
It'll rasp. It'll be rasping and feeding on the florets.
Yep.
And so we had one grower who's he's actually the most productive small grower in the country.
Yep.
He's a 6 to 7 ton a hectare grower.
Oh gosh.
That's
up there.
His numbers are very, very good. He noticed a change in the colour to his flower. He's just north of Brisbane. He noticed a change in the colour of the flower, so he asked me to come down, and we identified the mite there. And we addressed it chemically, and he ended up with nearly 100 tonne off his farm again, which he's back up at that.
So that is that's a genuine difference.
Yeah, and he is quite convinced if we hadn't found and addressed that, he would be down quite significantly. So he's at that point. They were probably 3/4 expanded green flowers.
Yep.
And he could flick them, and they were falling apart.
Oh, they fell apart.
Yeah.
See, I mean, I'm told if you flick them during flowering season, you'll get lace bug.
You can get
that'll fall on your hand. Right. You flick the flower and then you see what drops.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's pollen or bug or whatever, but at the same time, broad mite could exist. But the stuff we're spraying for lace bug, transform, I forget the name of some of these others, doesn't kill this mite, does it?
No.
It's a spider, effectively. It's a tiny spider.
Yeah. There's only certain products that.
Abamectin?
Abamectin is one of them. Yeah.
That's not a nice chemical.
No. And part of what I've tried to do over the years is help the growers develop programs that mean we do not have chemicals on the flowers when they're open.
Yeah.
So if we think there's a likelihood of pest, we address it at the green flower stage, because we've got no residues on the flowers for the bees to be deterred, and we certainly don't want to be spraying chemical on open flower when there's bees present.
Well, this was the diazinon thing, wasn't it? That people would spray for lace bug on diazinon or end up killing the bees that visited. But abamectin, I don't know if it's harmful to bees, but it's it's a rough chemical.
Yeah, so it is something that needs to be looked at very carefully. And so what I'm suggesting, and I'm certainly not suggesting that broad mite is the silver bullet that's caused all this.
No.
But for me, from what I've seen in our region, and the fact that I can find it down here, it's something we need to rule out more than anything.
Okay.
Because basically the last thing I want for our growers is another low.
Is another 2025.
Correct.
Yeah.
So if I can, if we can find anything to help improve that set, and if this has contributed, like I said, there's a number of other things I believe in play as well.
Yeah.
In the poor set, and we can have a chat about those.
Yeah.
But we can't rule out in certain regions that this thing hasn't contributed.
Yeah. Well, look, let's walk down and have a look at some more of these trees. What do we do about out-of-season flowering when this happens like this? I mean, you're a pest scout from way back.
Yeah.
Is it ever worth spraying?
It's
not this time of year, or?
It's interesting because we've always said it's best probably just to let it go, because we don't want to. When it comes to our hotspot spray programs, we don't want different sizes of nuts there. We're trying to target ideally
nuts that are all at the same stage of development.
But
right.
In reality, I actually think a reasonable amount of our crop can come from early flower.
This early though?
I don't know about this early.
Yeah, this is pretty early.
This is early. Yeah. So it will.
I mean,
go.
they're healthy flowers.
Yeah,
look at this.
The reason I would be looking at those is the potential for something like the mite or another pest, lace bug or the like, to build up on that.
Yeah.
And then be there to move on to the main flower.
Yeah. So the traditional wisdom is that early season flowering helps sustain lace bug. It gives something for them to feed on and build up numbers. Then when you get real flowering, it comes and hits them.
Yeah.
But it's still not worth it money-wise. Obviously, we've got to think about the money side of it.
That's it. Well, we know what the cost of production's like nowadays, and the chemicals aren't getting cheap.
They're not cheap, are they?
No.
Yeah.
All the inputs are going up, so that is a big part of what we try to help the growers. Is to justify each spray round, and through the monitoring we work out these ETLs, these threshold limits, to make sure that the amount of insect damage that's going on is causing more damage financially than the cost of a spray.
Okay.
Well, the cost of action doesn't need to be a spray particularly, it can be the release of beneficials, whatever it be, whatever action you're going to take.
Yeah. Are the green lacewings that I know Bioresources were a fan of those, are green lacewings capable of eating broad mites?
Don't think broad mite is one of their
food.
Food preferences. I've got some great photos of lacewing larvae attacking lace bug larvae.
Yeah.
That's one of my favourite photos I took. It was a one-shot one. I put it up on a tractor tyre and I got one shot with my camera and then it blew off. So, that's one of my favourite photos. And that was a brown lacewing larva, I believe. Taking out the lace bug larva.
A lace bug larva, yeah.
But you do often see them taking out a lot of aphids and general predators.
Yeah, but then of course once we spray in spring, a lot of these beneficials get killed.
Yeah, it is tricky.
Yeah. The weevil is the ultimate pest in the sense of it seems to be unkillable except by indoxacarb or there's some new spray for it. Are we any closer to getting a better solution for that?
I will have to put my hand up and say the weevil is one I don't have a hell of a lot of experience with.
Okay.
Because we don't have it in the glasshouse gympie and Bundy regions. It's specific to down here and I think possibly the Atherton table.
Oh really?
So
I thought it was through Bundy. Yeah.
No, it's not up there. It's I mean there's some fantastic scouts down here, Jericho's, Scott Hill and the guys there. They're the ones who are really switched on to the weevil.
And I've heard them talk publicly as well about these things. Okay, so Glasshouse has had a bad year, Northern Rivers has had a bad year. Obviously they share some of the same kind of weather.
Yeah.
And obviously but different pests. the nuts so small this year? I mean, what have you got any theories on why?
Look, there's always talk about. Well, one thing that we know has had impact the last 2 years is the environment. The trees are confused, and we can see that here with the early flowering.
They don't know what season it is.
They don't know what season it is.
Yeah.
So they're flowering out of whack. We also talk about the number of solar units through October, November, December. So if we get a lot of cloudy, overcast days, when the nuts should be expanding, and they're just not getting those units they need. So that's been discussed. The one thing I would like people to have to think about as possibly having also impacted in the set is that when I talk about the trees being confused, I recall myself last spring that we had trees both flowering and flushing at the same time. Where, from memory, I'm quite sure the flush would normally come a little bit after
the flowering. Yeah,
it's basically the solar panels being created to produce to bring the new crop through.
Right.
But if they're flushing and flowering at the same time, is that tree diverting the carbohydrates? It should be diverting to the flower and the nut set
into the flush. Yeah.
Possibly
who knows?
Contributed.
Do we see these trees, and we'll just keep walking along because it's an interesting view. These young 344s, they're bushier than I thought. I thought they were very much a single leader thing, but these ones are bushy.
Yeah, the 344s. It is a way to differentiate these from the 741s.
Yep.
The 741s will.
They're very tall and thin.
Yeah, they get that. They describe it as a turkey necking effect.
Yep.
But the 344s, they have that more traditional Christmas tree shape when they're young.
It really is,
As they get a bit older, they're a little bit harder to tell the difference between 741 and 344. And then the way, and this was something Ian McConaughey asked me to do quite early, was to try to identify different varieties on the farm by characteristics, and I can tell the difference by the shape of the nut.
I can see from the shape of the leaf that's a 344, but I'm not much good on anything else. I mean, if you'd asked me to pick what this was, the only hint I would get was the pre-season flowering, which I've got on my farm as well. Are we any closer to finding a perfect pollinator, or do you think 246 is?
Oh, look, from the literature, that because I've been in the orchards in flowering time for nearly 30 years now. I just started to see trends of what was visiting the trees pollination wise. Then I sort of looked into as much of the literature as I could. And then I found like charts which from early work from Cameron McConkie, and I think it's Bisange for Thange or something like that.
I've read some stuff by St. Cameron McConkie, and I initially confused him with Ian McConaughey, but it's a slightly different spelling.
No, so they put together basically a table of what planting partner would have a greater nut influence on increase in nuts per raceme. And that early work identified 246 as a very good general pollinator.
Right.
Which is, so you've got your pollinators. Your pollinators, the insect.
Pollinator's the insect. The pollinizer is the tree.
Is the one giving you the pollen parent.
Yes, exactly.
So I do like Robbie's design here of having basically a pollinizer being the 246 in the middle of there. Because what you want is that bee to have the shortest distance
between
to move that cross pollen.
So I'm trying to do that as well with the Macadamia R. There was some research a few years ago that looked at pollinizers and the resulting size of the nuts from the cross-pollinated nuts. And I know that I think 344 had they nominated some other tree as being better for pollinizing 344 than 246 in terms of nut size, but nut numbers I don't know.
Look, there's work by a researcher called Brad Howler, which is very good reading. And Stephen Truman has done a literature review. Well, he's done another paper just recently. So Stephen Truman and Helen Wallace, very, very good pollination researchers. And Stephen's stuff, his literature review is one I go back to continually.
Right.
And you will always read in literature the benefits of cross pollination.
Yeah.
It's something I've been going on about for a long time, and was why I also got very excited about the native bees and how they work and what they do.
You've done work, haven't you, on that farm that used to belong to Ian, where he had 80 different varieties?
Yeah.
Now, that cross-pollination's not a problem there.
Not in that look, no. So that's.
Did it crop okay?
Yeah,
no one's been able to answer me that question.
It did. It's a wild block. It was right next to the little nursery that I ran right back at the start. So
I've got some signs from that very nursery in my orchard. 788s and 835. So that Marco Prenzel went and got signs for me and made a few of those for me because I was curious in those varieties. If you obviously planting 344s now I don't think it's awfully common, but Robbie I know is a fan of the 344 because the nut drops well. And so there's good abscission, and if you want to use ethereal, it will work.
Well, Robbie was telling me this morning about some of the numbers he's getting off the trees of this age in the blocks that are planted with this design, and it's pretty impressive. So maybe he's onto something. He also says it does well in the coastal flats in New South Wales. I'll have to take his word for it because I'm in a very different spot, as you can imagine. But with the bee concern, I mean, we definitely had an absence of pollinators when we needed them, and my own observation was there were bees around, but then when we saw them, they seemed to be wanting to eat other things like clover and grevilleas and it is a concern, and now we have Varroa in Queensland as well now.
So Varroa's hit the Glasshouse Mountains?
It's there. It's in the Glasshouse Mountains.
It's a shame.
It's a shame because that's going to reduce the bee movements around the orchards. Around the regions. It's getting tricky.
But your remedy for that has always been native bees.
Natives, to me, natives on a bee per bee basis are better, but we just don't have the numbers of them. So we used to think we could propagate one hive into 2 every year. That's definitely not the case. It takes a lot longer than that. Which is why I mentioned before, every bee is a good bee. Whether pollination specific honeybees are going to be the answer, I think they might be, until we can and to fill that gap, until we can catch up with the natives. There is work going on through the Pollination Fund at the moment to try to develop a quicker way to propagate natives. But until then, we need every bee we can get.
Now, I know there's a range issue with native bees. They don't like flying very far, and they're just little creatures.
They do say that they'll only travel 500 metres. I am quite convinced they
go further than that.
They are that keen on macadamia pollen when it comes out. They will travel well further than that.
Right, that was going to be my next question. Do they have a preference for macadamia pollen?
Native stingless bees do. They have a real affinity. They've evolved in Australia with the macadamias as their that was their pollinator, which clearly in the way they evolved. So it's good that they show it as a preferred food, because the honeybees seem to like clover, and they do. And some of the early talks I gave to the AMS, I had videos showing the honeybees in the clover on the ground, right below the macas in full flower and panned up. And there's no, so we advocated at the time, slash your clover out if it's flowering during maca flowering time. That's what my neighbour does. I thought he was just being bloody minded. No, it's actually a good idea. Trying to get the bees up into the trees. So it's not a problem with the stingless, the natives, because they have such an affinity with macadamia pollen. All right, so I'm Joe Farmer. I know nothing about bees. I would love to experiment with native bees, maybe by just getting a single hive. It's going to cost me a bomb, probably about $600, $500. I can put it in a hive, and I know that these hives are splittable, and you can then you sort of split one hive and then put together a new hive, and you've got two hives once every couple of years or so. Is it worth doing? Is it worth getting a single hive and just getting used to it? It's not going to do many trees, but... You could start with one just to get your management practices right, but if you want to get reasonable numbers going, I would suggest you try to start with 10. Right. And I know it's an outlay. But you want to be, you want... Well, five. It's about $5,000 worth of bees. But then obviously you get to split and then make more. Do you have to remove the hives every time you spray? So there is a MaxSmart video I did a number of years ago.
Okay.
And we look at a couple of different models of having a certain number of hives on farm permanently, and then bringing in more hives.
Yep.
And then when we bring them in, we can bring them into the middle of the orchard for the flowering period, and
Yep.
then take them away for the rest of the spray period. And the ones that stay there on farm year round are a little bit more distant to, they might be 20-30 metres from the outside row.
So you can still spray.
Correct.
Without moving them,
Yep.
because obviously that's a maintenance issue as
Yes.
well. Is putting them too close together? I've seen videos of native bees having fights with each other, and they basically kill each other till they're all dead.
Very early on, I made a big mistake of doing that. I brought in 50 hives, and we put them along the spur of a hill at the end of every row, and then I went away, and it rained overnight, and the growers rang me up the next day and said the bees are all fighting. And when I got back, and I had them all sitting on a Besser block, one Besser block each, on 50 of them across the top of this thing.
Yeah. Dead bees all over the ground.
They were fighting, so they were drifting in the wind, going into the wrong hives, and the little guard bees at the entrance were starting
attacking them. Right.
Out, and it ended up with me having to carry all of them back to my car because it got wet and I couldn't drive it. It was a nightmare. So
all right. So stingless doesn't mean non-aggressive,
no,
but
they bite. They don't sting, they bite.
Oh, they bite you?
Pinch, they pinch you, yeah.
Oh, right,
They
okay.
soft like your skin. But there are, what we have since learnt, that was very early on for me. If we start with a number of hives on a communal stand, which is my preference for the growers, and you might start with 4 or 5, you introduce them to that stand in a sort of a bit of a clever way to stop them fighting, and then you from those original ones on the stand, you won't get those fights.
Oh, okay.
So there's ways.
You socialise them.
You do, yeah. And
that's amazing.
Yeah, we can have up to 25 hives then on a communal stand in the one spot, and there'll be no
Just a
fights.
close, wow.
Sitting on top of each other, yeah.
My God, okay. So is that the answer for longer term pollination? I mean, we're trying to avoid 2025 here, and I don't know to what extent that was a cause. I'd say it was a contributing cause, but
you can tell when a flower is open, and we talked about potentially having another chat come flowering time. You can tell at anthesis when the flowers are out and white if a bee's visited them or not.
Yeah.
The way where the pollen is presented at the end of the pistil, right out at the stigma, the flower or the floret deposits self-pollen out there.
Yeah.
And what you want to see in flowering is that pollen stripped away.
Right.
And if those flowers or racemes start to senesce, and after they've been open for a week or so, and you can still see those pollen clumps on there, they haven't been visited. So that's an indication of lack of pollination.
Right. And were you seeing that this year?
Yeah.
Okay.
It definitely contributed, because it is something you can see. Once you get your eye in, and I do give talks on this, you can see if that flower's been visited.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's a sort of difficult segue into crop forecasting. They've just announced that they've reduced the Australian macadamia harvest forecast by 1/3, which is a hell of a chunk off. Wasn't it obvious long before now?
It's a very tricky thing to do. We as consultants, years and years ago, were asked to try to estimate a crop, and our best, the way we could do it was to look at that nut set. You want to do it obviously after nut shed.
Yeah.
So 10 weeks post anthesis, so flowers are all out in September.
Yep.
10 weeks after that, you get your first shed, and then you'll get your second sort of shed. Then you want to look at it after that and work out sort of what's set.
So the initial forecast's December or so. I've never made a note of when the first forecast is. So
in reality, it needs to be about then, because it needs to be after the nut shed.
Right. Apologies, viewers, for the wind. Some of that's going to come through the microphone, but the GoPro. There we could. The GoPro suppresses some of it. Yeah. Oh, maybe that's a bit better. So, so in December you try and create a forecast. It just seems like we came out with a forecast that was more than last year. And yet we'd had the problems with pollinators, and we'd had the problems with flower blight. I don't know how much flower blight you had. You're not responsible for the forecast. Obviously, the processors communally come up with one. I know they ring their growers, but there's got to be something more scientific than that, hasn't there?
No, it's we've looked at a number of things over the years, and we to try to do it automatically, lasers and coming down and trying to scan the trees and look for they really struggle to pick up nuts in behind leaves to do that. So at the moment, unfortunately, the best thing is our guess and our growers' guess.
Is anecdotal.
It's and you look at, all you can do is you look in a cubic metre of canopy.
Yep.
And you try to think, what did I get last year? Is this more or less than then?
Yeah.
And work out a bit of an estimate. And obviously, it's been well off this year.
Yeah.
The other tricky thing is sometimes the crop will be up high, and last year there was crop there, but it was all up high.
Yeah,
and I think people,
which is what people used to tell me.
Yeah,
but then
it came down.
And then Nick, I used to say, how can you tell you you're going to have a good year? And he used to say, well, when it drops, mate.
Yeah,
and that was his view of it.
Yeah.
But we then get to a position where the industry expects all this crop, and we know that Wally's in particular, being a New South Wales processor, came a cropper because they weren't able to fulfil their contracts to supply nut and shell to China.
Yeah.
The nut coming in was way less than forecast. The New South Wales farmers, I don't need to tell them this, they had a hard time getting out on their orchard and even picking up the nut that was there. Yeah. Some of it was sunk in the mud. Yeah. We don't, obviously the farmers in the case of Wally's have really borne the brunt of that, in the sense that, that the notional price has now been dropped nearly by half in a year when there's a shortage of nut, where you'd think if anything the price would go up. I just, and I'm on a one-man mission, I guess I have to admit to you, I'm on a one-man mission against notional pricing. I don't believe in it. I don't believe in it legally. I don't believe in it ethically. But we can't. I suppose you look at a macadamia farmer and you come down to tin tax. Yeah. We're not an insurance company, and we're not a lending institution. Yeah. And when I arrived in the macadamia industry, and I've been in it much, much less than you, I've looked at these deals that the processors do with growers, and Nutworks, I should add, is absolutely in the range, right? You have a notional price, you have a delayed payment schedule, just like nearly every other processor. Yeah. Right, and it's obviously a function of what the market will bear, and I don't have any criticism of Nutworks for following what the industry does. Yeah. But it just seemed to me like, so as someone entering the industry, what the hell is this? Yeah. It's that we're going banker for our buyers. The title to the nut passes. Right? I mean, I've heard the story that there's a whole silo of nut sitting at Summerland House, and that is Wally's nuts. Right. The farmers want the nut back, but they can't have it because the legal title to the nut passes the moment they receive it. Yeah. Never mind when they're paid, the legal title passes, and they're buyers of nuts, and yet when we buy fertiliser, we can't say to the fertiliser supplier, we'll see if it makes a crop and then we'll pay you, and then what we pay you might change depending on how good the crop is. But we get treated that way on our end of it. I'm just wondering, is there a way forward that could possibly be, mediated, if you like, by the AMS, where we could have a standard way of dealing with processors and growers, so that we don't have a Wally's. We don't have the ability to say, well, look, because there's notional pricing from other processors, we're going to go along with that. If everyone agreed to a rule that said, okay, let's have a fixed price, let's have a time for payment, and the processors have to structure themselves financially in order to do that, simply because that's what the ground rules are. I realise from a processor's point of view, and you're not the manager, you don't have that side of things at Nutworks. I know that at the start of a season there is a cash flow problem in that you've received the nut, but you can't instantly turn it into those beautiful products that we just saw on my truck.
Correct, yeah.
And then particularly for someone who sells their product into the local market, you sell it throughout the year. Yeah. And so your inventory doesn't just disappear like a load of nuts to China. Now the short-term answer is you, Marquee, others who process in Australia will send some nuts over to China to get a cash flow to then pay the growers their initial payment,
Yeah.
whether that be 50% or, in fact, I don't know what it is for Nutworks.
40% early.
40% is the early payment option, right. So there is that, and I realise that there's a financial burden to pay for processors to say to farmers, okay, we'll pay you for your nuts in full as soon as we give them to you.
Yeah.
The flip side of that is we have to pay for fertiliser in full as soon as we get it. It just seems like an unequal kind of arrangement.
Yeah, I know it's very tricky because also the way it's unfolded with the reliance on China for the nut and shell market, and we're waiting for the Chinese New Year to go through to see how they work through that inventory over there,
right?
Which then spikes the demand, and that's falling after the first nuts are coming in. So essentially, we really don't know the demand for the nut and shell until after the nut starts to come in, and we've got growers going, well, they're delivering nuts and they don't even know what the price is going to be. It's very tricky for us.
Right.
Between that and a couple of other food shows which happen in March as well,
right.
We have to forward sell enough of our crop that we are confident we can maintain that price for the back end of the selling period. So we have to be very confident, and that for us comes with, well, it certainly helps that we've got our value add and we're getting that percentage of revenue we do through there.
Well, you know what you're selling that for.
I can't wait to the point where we have the bulk of our nut going through our value add, because we will not be influenced by that nut shell up and down at all. So that's where we want to head, and that's the direction we're going. But we certainly do have to work in the nut and shell space at the moment, to a lesser degree than most, and it really is trying to ensure we have very good relationships, long-term relationships with our buyers over there. So they basically, for us, will put the confidence with us that they will maintain the prices they've promised.
Right.
When the wheels can come off is when
is the one-off deals with someone you don't know.
Correct, and the discounting of that. If people, if everyone held their ground on the prices that we were going to be charging the sellers overseas, we wouldn't have these sort of issues.
Okay. So pretend for a moment that you're not Nutworks and that you're a processor that only ships nut and shell to China or nuts around the world market. When is the bulk of nut coming onto the market? We're still largely a southern hemisphere crop, right? So does that mean that the nut market for nut and shell gets flooded in June or around mid-year?
That traditionally had been the peak sort of end of May, June was where the bulk of our crop will come in.
Right.
The last 2 years that has happened though, we used to see almost the bell curve of nut intake.
Okay.
And we could work with that. We knew exactly what we were getting in what months, but the last couple of seasons,
well, with the weather,
the weather this year, so we had a record intake in March.
Did you? In Glasshouse?
In the Glasshouse region, but it wasn't for the best reasons.
It's because of the cyclone.
Us spot and bought nut down early. It was mature, but there was
small.
There was small nut there, but there was also very, very slight immaturity. And you deal with stuff like that and high moisture contents at the start of the season, you end up with brown centers. There's slightly more sugar in the nut.
Yeah.
We dry that down, and with heat you can exacerbate that. So
right.
And it petered off quite quick after March.
Yeah.
So we had to deal with that nut at the start of the season, and for us, we are lucky we can process that. And that's a hard nut to export as nut and shell, because it doesn't meet the specs that
are being pushed on you.
Yeah.
And the specs from China are going up and up.
They're getting tighter and tighter
in terms of bigger size.
They want
lower reject.
They want higher kernel recoveries now. It used to be, all the.
Oh, they want higher kernel recoveries too.
They are now chasing some higher kernel recovery nuts.
That's new.
It is. They sort of, and I've been over in China, and you'll see marked on the boxes thin shells, and they say more meat. So
more meat.
More meat. It's on.
That's awesome.
Boxes, yeah.
Oh well, there you go.
So
we're ready. We're ready for the vegans, aren't we?
Yeah.
Well, that's okay. So, but that's a flood of crop around the middle of the year. And look, I heard a rumour. You don't have to confirm it, but late last year, we're talking September, October, November, there were importers scratching around for more nut, and there were Australian producers scratching around for more nut, and we were sort of running out.
Yeah.
Was that because we'd shipped too much to China in the rush, or what was going on?
Yeah, I don't know. I dare say again, crop was down last year, and I know, if processors were locked into trying to fill contracts they have, and contracts with buyers that they want to maintain going forward, they were probably out there offering prices higher than originally, and just to try to appease those buyers and to maintain those buyers there, I would expect.
Right. So we've sort of dealt with the challenges of a nut and shell shipper to China. You can ride with the ups and then sink with the downs to an extent. But someone who has to process nuts and make value add yourself, I guess the concern is getting enough nut to keep your employees busy, to make enough product for that. And this is something that Macadamia's directive, they have the same issue in the sense of they've got machines, they've got employees who need to be kept busy. If the nut isn't coming in, they make less money. It's not as extreme as breaching a contract to China and them suing you for damages.
Look, we are lucky. So this year, with the new forecasts we've seen, I think we're going to be looking at handling around or possibly even a little bit more than 10% of the national crop. We do have...
That's as nut works?
That nut works, yeah. So we have some very dedicated long-term suppliers. So we know nearly where we're going to sit, and in a year where the crop is down, we're very happy with the guys who have supplied. We're not in the business of growing for growth's sake. As I said, we're looking to expand our value add. And we want to grow smartly. We want to grow to the degree that we are still putting more and more into that package, and not just selling nut and shell. Right.
Now this is sort of a different topic again, but in response to one of my other videos, it was the price comparison video. I did get a response from one of the guys at Marquee who took issue with something I said, and I was talking about getting decent sorting so that you get a lower amount of reject, and that if you've got a good sorter, you should have a very low amount of reject. His response was, and I accept it humbly, was stop looking at quality as being a function of sourcing. Quality happens on the farm. And so I mean, he's obviously talking about insect and stuff that you can't always sort for.
Correct. You can get late stings and through the shell, and as a sorter, you're not going to see that. You're not going to pick that up.
Right. So is your advice to farmers very much along those lines as well, saying don't just rely on someone sorting it all out for you and sending in all your crap?
Correct. So, we've had a couple of... And unfortunately, and I mean, it's certainly happened in this region, the weather conditions just stop people getting spray rounds on, and especially late rounds. And it's the late stings of spotting bug that you won't see in the shell. They will sting through a hard shell. And
cause what?
They will cause that blemish,
shrivelling, or discoloration.
It'll be a sting mark through the shell without an indication on the shell, and the kernel will have a bite and a sting in it, and it'll be a shrunken lesion. The
insect damage is always reject, isn't it? Or is it sometimes commercial?
Look, it's interesting. I have seen overseas as well, they will buy commercial nut with small stings and they will cut that out. It's viable for them to process.
If your labour cost is low enough. Imagine cutting out nuts individually. Holy moly. Oh dear.
Look, and the conditions the last couple of years have been very challenging. We know spotting bug's going to be there from October right through until February. One thing I try to talk to our growers about is the number of spray rounds they're looking at, but their coverage. Coverage is keen when it comes to plant protection.
Have you got a favourite chemical for fruit spotting bug?
Well,
or do you steer clear of that a bit? I've used Trevor.
Trevor early in the spotting bug program, so October, November.
Your Halloween spray.
When the pressure gets a bit higher, because it will leave a lot of your spiders. I did a lot of work with Trevor early on, proving that it left a lot of spiders in the orchard. So,
which is good.
So if we can leave those guys in there as long before we go to the harder chemistries come November, December, but you want your things like your synthetic pyrethroids.
Well, we've got bulldog fans and
Yep.
cyborg and those sorts of things because
Yep.
they're cheap. They're so cheap. They're very attractive to farmers on that level.
But not only that, bulldog or beta cyfluthrin will take out nut borer as well as spotting bugs. So you get into that November, December period when
Right.
you're trying to use one product to take out two main pests. Trevor won't do that. Trevor won't take out nut borer. So that's when you move from your Trevors to your bulldogs. Or
Yep.
people might look at adding something specifically, something softer to Trevor to try to target
Okay.
nut borer, but then you're looking at a pretty expensive mix.
So your late spray for this late sting stuff,
Yep.
is it a February job?
It can be.
Yeah, because
so-
that's fairly late on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing I've done with our growers over the years is to sort of show them some of the techniques that I use.
Yep.
And it might be to come in February, put drop sheets down, spray individual trees throughout your orchard,
Yep.
and actually look for the presence of spotting bug.
Okay.
Or up in the Gympie region and down here Leptocorus as well. So
Yeah.
that's an emerging pest. It's been around forever, but it's certainly becoming apparent that it might be more prevalent than people think. So
Yeah.
and the problem with that, and the reason we drop sheet and look for that, is because bulldog is not as effective on Leptocorus as it is on spotting bug. So
Right.
if you identify you've got Leptocorus December, January, February, you might have to look at a change in product to deal with it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And in terms of the fungus, that sort of stuff, you've been spotting for that before?
Yeah, it's for years I've always been an advocate of Femi Arkansani's work. Most of our guys.
He's a character, isn't he?
He's great, Femi.
Yeah.
Most of our guys will do at least 2 fungicide sprays at match head, and then 3 to 4 weeks later,
Yep.
if it continues to rain, they will add 3 and 4.
Right.
We did have guys this year who put on up to 4 fungicide rounds and still did have husk spot. Like the pressure was very
So it was a
high.
high pressure year this year, wasn't it? Too much moisture, not enough sun.
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
And hence that early nut foot. Luckily, the maturity just beat the husk spot. So the husk spot essentially damages the husk enough for the tree to reject that nut and drop it.
And drop it, which means immaturity.
And normally, if it drops it in December, that nut's gone.
Yeah.
If it drops it like it did this year, it's sort of February into March, you can just
You've got grey areas.
Yeah.
So the early shipments I heard were full of reject, and they were really pretty awful. They'll be getting better now, but
Yeah. The early nuts are always very challenging, and it's also when we have the highest moisture content coming. Yeah, we can get moisture contents up to 24% coming in the first round.
that's high.
It's
I thought 20 was high. That's really high.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
That's wet nut, and with that come other issues as we're drying. It's challenging at the start of the season.
Another thing I've featured in recent videos is that I've become a bit of an advocate for if you're doing a replant and creating a new orchard to move to these later dropping varieties. Does that create issues for you?
No.
Like, obviously
take,
you expect a lot of nuts in March, but if people start swapping to MCT1, for example, you're not going to get them till June.
We've taken nut all the way until October in the past.
Yeah. But
so,
you can work around that?
Yeah.
Okay.
That was interesting when you mentioned that, and to me it makes sense. If you're in an area that, as it appears, the climate is changing, or however you want to.
Well, getting wetter during autumn.
Getting wetter during autumn.
Yeah.
Are late dropping varieties the answer? Possibly.
Yeah.
That was something I've not actually thought of before.
Yeah, but glasshouse, same deal. Bundaberg less so.
Yeah.
Right. So we've got a number of issues covered there, Chris, and we've got other things we can talk about as well in more detail down the track. And I hope to come up and do a road trip to Yandina and explore some more of them with you. Meantime, they can see you at the Mac Group in July.
In July, yep. Come along there. Have a listen to Jeremy and myself. And what I really like, which one of your earlier videos, Daniel, was the your promotion of the benchmarking teams, working the benchmarking meetings.
Yeah.
I really do see them as a really good. A
Well,
positive for growers getting information.
there's not that many macadamia farmers, and so shared information just seems to be gold, doesn't it, within our industry? And I'm still very much a newbie, but people like yourself 30 years in, you're still scratching your head at some of the stuff that happens. When do you get to be an expert in this?
I don't know. I worked for a long time with Tim Salmon, who's now retired to a degree. He's still doing some consultancy, but even after 25 years, every year we'd say something new. Something's happened this year, and there's something new again. It's
anyway,
interesting.
Keeps you on your toes, and no doubt the growers you advise are pretty happy for your advice. So that's great. Thank you very much for coming on camera. That was a treat for me, and thanks to Robbie Commons for letting us film at his beautiful farm here down in Tevan. And to be continued for sure.
Nice one.
Thanks, Chris. Bye.